Welcome. I'm very happy to have you on stage, the three representatives, the three natural elements from soil, from water, and from air. So I would like to start the discussion to tell me a little bit what point of contamination or pollution you actually address, and how do you address that? Eva, maybe we can start from you, from the soil.
All right. Okay, so good morning, everyone. About pollution, the first thing I would like to say is that most of the time when we think about it, we think about plastics or things we can actually see, but in fact, it's more invisible. And what we address in the company I'm working on are the invisible pollution. There's several types. They can be organic type, for example, pesticides, fungicides, but also inorganic components. So like heavy metals are an example for that. And these specific components cannot degrade themselves in the environment. They are here and they stay here and they accumulate also in the soil, but also in our organism, which is a problem. For example, to give heavy metals, we have copper, arsenic, lead. We can be very problematic. And the thing I also wanted to point out is that it's okay a problem for our health. If we have this in our body, it's just going to accumulate, cause cancer, for example, but also this causes a huge damage on the soil itself and the life of the soil. We often forget that soil is a living ecosystem, very complex. And so yeah, we really need to take care of that, and heavy metals are a cause of decreasing fertility, for example. And also, we are going to talk a lot of pollution today, but I will say also that there's so many different other things which decrease soil fertility, soil life, and are as important as pollution also. And the soil is in a bad state, actually.
So I think you had some data that 25%, if I'm not mistaken, of the current soil in Europe cannot be used,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. 25% are contaminated in Europe at least one heavy metals or also other organic compounds. So it's a lot. And as I said, there's also the way we treated our soil and the way we see agriculture, for example, is very problematic because we see the soil as a storage, which means that we can fulfill it and empty it, and don't consider it as a living ecosystem, which we need to take care of by better practices, actually.
If I could just make a comment and maybe summarize, is somehow we take for granted something that we have. The way that we produce food and the way that it's consumed is like a machine that we have there. It works for us, and then we just pollute it with a lot of heavy metals that actually affect and the production and our health on a bigger scale, right? And what else do we take for granted when we talk about water cycles and water? What is happening in that sector, Katrin?
So when we're talking about water, we talk about human health, which is directly connected to clean water. And we are in the field of microplastic pollution. And this field is a global environmental problem. We all already know about this problem, and we get rid of the microplastics because they are harmful for us as human beings, but they are destroying biodiversity, and they have direct influence on climate health. And here we need solutions at the right point of source, at the origin, and we are dealing with this issue, looking for solutions for microplastic-free water.
What exactly do you do about microplastic? How do you free our water from microplastic?
So first is that we have to know about how much do we have at the hotspots. Where are the hotspots? So the detection is one main point to find out where to start for the removal. Where makes it sense? Is it the washing machine? Is it driving less car? Or is it maybe in the industries where we have production, manufacturing, and recycling? And we dig a little bit deeper. We sort out that industries are a main driver for microplastics in our environment. And here we set solutions. Additionally, we have solutions for the municipal wastewater treatment plant together with the forced cleaning stage, which is focusing on micropollutants. So here we have a combination of removal of micropollutants like pharmaceuticals, like the pesticides, and microplastics. And for the industries, we give them the hint, you can change now if you start now, because there are no regulations and laws at the moment. We're not talking about limits in every field where microplastics is released into the environment. And we give all the stakeholders the information how we now can change our water quality. Not in the future, just start now. And we do it in a simple and easy, straightforward way. So we clump the particles together, which means that we go from the invisible, non-seen nanoplastics, microplastics, to larger agglomerates, which we form with the help of a hybrid silica gel. This is a silicon containing non-toxic substance for us, for the human beings, and not for the environment or the animals living in the water. So not completely non-toxic. And we're forming these larger agglomerates. They pop up at the surface. You see them, and you can skim them off. And if you see a problem, you can get rid of it very easy. And for the industries, this means that we sort out the microplastics, and we build a waste as a resource concept around. We use this agglomerates, so the microplastic waste, which is coming out of the industrial process water, and we put them into new products without negative effects on the environment. And this is a closed loop. This is how circular economy works in the future for the industries. We give them money back if they start now.
I think it's very important what you mentioned, like bringing the invisible part and make it visible. The fact that we have things that we don't see, that doesn't mean that they don't exist or they don't affect us. And talking about more invisible and more difficult things, let's move into the air part, right? What is happening there about pollution?
Thanks for that opportunity. I think, so actually great answers from both of you. As listening to you, I was thinking, oh, this is actually, well, you can't really see air pollution around you, and we actually know the sources of air pollution, for example, but unlike the water PFAS system, there is actually regulations in place for air pollution that industries have to adhere to, for example. And I think the biggest challenge right now is that the World Health Organization has basically stated, based on the evidence over the last 15 years. So their last air quality guidelines was in 2007. And they just revised it over the last 15 years and released a new version in 2021. And they basically say that the air pollution guidelines are half that of what they were for PM2.5, fine particulate matter. This is particles of dust or soot that breathe and you can go into your lungs, basically. So in 2007, they said the safe limit was 10 microgram per meter cube over 1 year, annual average basis. But now they say health effects can be observed down to 5 microgram per meter cube. So for example, if last year or a couple years ago, Paris had an average PM2.5 of say 11 microgram per meter cube, but it's coming close to the WHO guideline. Now we know that it's still 2 times over the safe threshold. So I think, and same thing for nitrogen dioxide, which is emitted from cars, for example, and trucks. And so that limit has been lowered by a factor of 4 by the WHO. And these are levels where it's really difficult for anybody to actually breathe or see it. So for example, if you have a diesel truck and you see black smoke coming out, you know that's bad. But even if it is not, but there may still be pollution coming out of it, coming out of industry, coming out of restaurants. And these are toxic to human health, even at much lower levels than we previously thought, mainly because determining their health effects takes a long time. Epidemiological studies take like 10, 15 years to actually gather the amount of data that we need, but we know that because of these, even at these low levels, there are harmful health effects. So that's one side of it. The other side is obviously there are large parts of Asia and Africa where there is still development happening. People still use say wood for burning, for example, or they use dirty fuels. They still burn coal, for example. Actually, now Germany also burns coal, but that creates air pollution, right? And that creates but people need that power that is generated. They need the wood for cooking, but all that generates pollution. And so the question is, how can you actually create a movement for change? And a lot of these things, you can do some individual changes, but a large part of it really relies on government intervention or large-scale interventions. Like you want to do clean cooking at scale, right? So how do you incentivize people to take cleaner sources of fuel, because your pellets or your LPG, liquid petroleum gas, may be too expensive for them. So they're just making an economic choice. And so how do you incentivize them? How do you incentivize them to actually switch from a dirty generator that's running on say cheap fuel, diesel or gasoline. How do you incentivize them to switch to a solar power? Or even I saw a solution here for biogas from cow dung, for example, from Nigeria. I think Tulu is maybe here around here somewhere. But basically, how do you incentivize them and make it affordable for people to do that, right? And so the way to do that, the way that the company that I represent today, Respirer, does that. We make small air quality sensors that are about 90% cheaper than traditional air quality monitors. They allow us to get data in places where there is no data existing before. So for example, I'm using those sensors now in Lagos, Nigeria, to detect air pollution from generators. And we are seeing really high levels of pollution. So the goal is try and create that noise in the space for governments to take action, for international development bodies to come and say, this is a real problem. How can we help subsidize this transition to cleaner fuels and cleaner sources of energy? So making the invisible and visible effectively so that people can actually know what the problem is.
So the most important, I would say, as you said, is to incentivize people to switch and especially do it in an affordable way for them, because we are not talking about very privileged communities that have access to resources and it's a matter of choice. Yes, I buy organic or I buy not organic, for example, but it's a matter of actually existence and a matter of functionality. So it's quite important that the affordability part. Something that is very interesting about what you do is that you have the sensors, air sensors, but powered by solar energy. Yeah. And I would like to, if you could highlight a little bit why this is important and why this is linked also with climate change.
Great question. So this example that we are doing, this project that we're doing in Lagos, Nigeria, right? Nigeria actually is like one of the largest sources of crude oil. But they don't have their own refining facilities from what I understand. And their own power plants don't really work all the time. So their electricity grid for Lagos, a city of 20 million people, fails for like 7 or 8 hours a day, often for several hours at night. And they're human beings. They require electricity, they require lighting, they require air conditioning, fridge, refrigerators. We all use those things. And we rely on a super reliable electric grid. But in Lagos, this is not the case for like 1/3 of the day often. And so they go with the cheapest option that they have, which are generators. And so if you put an air quality monitor that runs on electricity, like line power, if your power is not there for the 8 hours of the day when people are using dirty generators, you'll not see the problem, right? And so it's really helpful that these sensors are actually very low power, and they can be powered off of solar panels. And so long as there is abundant solar power and there's a substantial battery backup, you can actually get data. Another example of this really quickly is Hurricane Maria, which hit Puerto Rico in 2017 and knocked out power in that islands for like several months. And so people were using generators. We just didn't know because the EPA's air pollution monitors require lots of electricity. And so they couldn't really work. We had no air quality data. I was able to send some solar powered sensors to Puerto Rico. They deployed it pretty quickly and we got some great data, which from an air pollution scientist perspective is great because it shows the problem that is there, but for the people there who are running generators and breathing those toxic levels of pollution, it was really bad.
Yeah, I think it's important to see also these two options of like climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation, because from the one side we're like, okay, we are producing a lot of fossil fuels and we have air pollution, then let's shut that down. But then if you don't have access to resources and you don't have access to energy, you end up in these situations that they light up, let's say, the more polluter generators, and as a result we don't have the data, we don't see actually what is happening there. I would like to return a little bit the discussion back to Eva to maybe describe also your solution and what is the process that you are using to, I wouldn't say extract, but maybe eliminate the pollution, the contamination in the soils.
So what I said earlier is that we're focused more on the heavy metals, and what we're trying to develop is the use of plants in order to remove these heavy metals from the soil, which is called phytomanagement, phytoremediation. And one particular technology we're using is the ability of some species to extract, like first resist to a high level of contamination, and then extract these pollutants from the soils to the aerial parts of the plants. So this has been constructed with evolution. Plants has adapt themselves to this level of contamination. And at the end of a cycle, we harvest all the crops, and then we're able to remove from the field these problems. And what is also important to mention is that, as I said, an alive soil is important to have this result as well. So it needs to be included in a larger regenerative agriculture, and all the technicals, devices we're using, or all the inputs we're putting in our soils also needs to be reconsidered to have a healthier soil and a living soil.
Super, thank you very much. And from what you have described so far, we already have the solutions, right? We know how to extract the heavy metals from the soil. We know how to extract the microplastics from the water in the water management trading facilities. And also we know how to detect the air pollution. So we have the technology, we have the data. What do we miss to make that a reality? Katrin? What do you think?
For the microplastic world, this means we need regulation and laws on the one hand, and we need more change makers on the industrial side who realize what impact they can generate by putting a solution into their processes. Because what everybody has to know is that you cannot create a sustainable product without a sustainable process. So if you have a sustainable process, then the product in the end makes sense. But is the production line or the manufacturing or the recycling that much polluted, or is it not circular in the end? You cannot get out a product which is green or which is sustainable. So this is what we address to the industries, build sustainable processes, and where we address our detection data as well as to the politics, that they set the regulations and laws on the right positions. So it's not a matter of putting a washing machine filter in a washing machine to have a solution, so it's not consumer responsibility, it's on polluters and the polluter pays principle to prevent the pollution at the start, not in between, not in the ocean. So we say start with the stop the flow strategy at the beginning, then you protect all the human beings, and finally you protect the living on this earth.
I think this is very important that we don't talk about quick fix solutions that, okay, we have pollution, then let's put a filter here and problem solved. But you see the systematic way, where does it start? Who are the actors involved? And also, I think it was in discussion with R, and I have kept it as a quote, that in order to have better policies and improve our policies, we need better data. And we did take into consideration the data that we have and put it into action, because as you describe it, it's like, oh, problem solved. Yeah, we can do that. What do you think? What are the main issues that we're facing?
Yeah, so I want to highlight a quote that the keynote speaker, Omnia, just mentioned, that 7 million lives are lost every year from air pollution, right? And a lot of those lives, those millions of lives, are actually in lower and middle income countries, you know, basically Africa, Asia, South America. But that's where there is a lack of air quality data in the first place. So many of these places where I'm actually working in multiple countries across Africa, there are very few regulatory air quality monitors in the first place. There is no actual ground data that people need. And so when a government wants to take action and they want to regulate industry, industry can push back and say, you know, you don't have the data to show that I am actually polluting. So the biggest change is actually there, and providing that data, making that data available so that people can actually identify what the problems are, what the hotspots are. Again, I think, Katrin, you mentioned hotspots, right? So in a city, you have hotspots where there are traffic, for example, or there might be unintended hotspots like restaurants, or there could be cooking or whatever. And so developing a network of sensors so you can actually detect these things, and then identifying hotspots, and then simply, you know, even on-site observations, just going there and doing it. But you need to know where the pollution is before you can actually identify what the sources are, and then you can actually figure out what the solutions are. Now, air pollution management by itself is not rocket science. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? It's complicated, it's technical, but the US has been doing it, the EU has been doing it for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And so these tools are well developed. We know the solutions, but actually making industries put in the investment to make the changes, making sure your fuel is the right quality and all that, you need to have the right data so that you can actually figure out what the solution is, because the worst thing you can do is actually say, this is the policy that I want to implement, and then the problem doesn't really reduce, the air pollution doesn't really reduce. And then then it gets a bad rap that, you told us this and, you're misleading us. So if you have accurate data, you can identify the right problems and you can propose the solutions and implement them and track them in real time. So that's what we need, really, more data.
Thank you. What about in the soil situation? What is the situation what do we miss to actually improve the situation with contamination in the soil?
Actually, there's several things I could say. But the first is the way we picture our lives and our society. Pollution of the soil is really linked to our desire, our needs, the way we see agriculture, and we didn't really take care of our soil, and now we're in a statement where they're very destroyed, and it's very hard to expect something from them. So just put this in a highlight, just to take care more of this. And I would also say, while using phytoremediation as a solution, we need also to consider that it needs time. Nature needs time to recover. And in our society, we are in a constant acceleration and we want everything now. And it's very hard for us to say, okay, there is a solution maybe, but it's going to take, for example, 10 years. And I think it's important to just highlight as well this, that plants can help us if we let them, or I don't know, organic matter can help us, microorganisms, bacteria in the soil, earthworms, everything is very, very important, but we need to just leave them a little bit of place. And also what is important, like as a human side, is I guess politics, because for example, in the agriculture fields, there's a policy, the common policy agriculture or something like that called in French PAC. This is in discussion this year. There will be a new law in June, and actually this is very important because it defines how we want our agriculture to be, how do we want to treat our soils. So this is really important. And what do we miss? I think that people can realize that they can be active and also take action. And you don't need to create the best solution or have the best startup in the world to take action. I think it's very easy at some point to just stand up for nature and against something and have a voice in that. So I will just encourage people to believe they have a voice, and also that when we hear in the news that there's a climate activist who does that or something, everyone can actually be a climate activist. And we'll encourage people to join movement, to join organization, collectives, and we really need to act together and not being individuals as always, as we learned we were. And as I said also, we need to take time and stop this constant needs of new desires and acceleration.
Thank you very much, and I think it's important what you highlighted, that each one of us can be a climate activist, and I think so many people all over the world these days here today and the previous days in the conference, it actually gives the spirit that each one of us can do something. So I could stay here for hours, to be honest, and talk with all of you about this topic, but because we run out of time, I would like to ask you, what would be the final message that you would like to convey to your audience from this speech outside today? What is the main thing that you want them to take with them?
So my information and my advice to the audience is become part of the solution. You are the change makers. You have a voice. This is what we heard before. You have a voice, you have a chance to really change and get out, step out for planet and people first. This is what we do at Wasserstrio all day, because we are a non-profit organization. We live this kind of, we need more change makers, and ask the experts and ask questions. If you do not believe the data, ask why, what, when. That helps a lot. So raise your voice. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I guess three things. One is, if you're an individual, raise your voice again, like I said, to your city governments and make sure that air quality data is available to you at your neighborhood level so you can identify what the pollution is. Then they can take action appropriately. If you're a company, if you're in a building, you can actually provide healthier, cleaner air for your employees, which also improves their performance overall. And that you can do with air quality management, basically your ventilation system based on air purification. The third thing, if you are an industry, you can actually be proactive. Again, like you said, not all industries are regulated, not all pollutants are regulated, but industries can actually do fence line monitoring of their emissions and stay ahead of the curve and actually be proactive in controlling their pollution, because all of us have to be responsible members of society together.
Thank you. Everyone, think you mentioned before the main topics, but I would like to ask you if you have some additional thoughts that you would like to share.
Maybe the last thing will be take this as a whole, like the whole situation is linked. And actually when we talk about pollution, actually we talk about everything else. So take this as a whole, try to have an impact on everything at the same time. And yeah, I think all the rest I already said, but yeah, consider the soil as a living ecosystem is really important. And yeah, encourage regenerative agriculture, better manner, and somehow understand that sometimes it's simple, like having habits or practices more simple is actually better, and we don't need to find, I don't know, the best techniques or to have this belief that we need to discover everything. Everything is already there in nature, I would say.
Yeah, nature is the biggest teacher for us, like the most great teacher that always solves. She's been here for billions of years, I would say. So I think it has much more wisdom than we actually think that we have. I would like to thank you all for being here, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and you got a lot of knowledge about how we contaminate our soils and what we could do. We need to push more governments. We need to be these people asking the right questions, and we need these amazing ideas and this passion that you have to actually solve the pollution in our climate. Thanks so much.